All right, so I'm going to do 3 things tonight. I have 3 goals. The first one is I'm going to spend just a few moments setting the table. And I want to talk a little bit about where we find ourselves as a nation, as a commonwealth, and as women 400 years after the beginning of slavery here in Virginia. And it's such an important milestone, 400 years. Our nation's only 241 years old. Put that into context. But 400 years ago, this year, 1619, the first Africans arrived here in chains. Slaves, not indentured servants, slaves. I want to be sure that we're clear about that. The second thing that I want to do is I want to talk briefly about, you saw it a little bit in the video, my second book, Black Woman Redefined, Dispelling Myths and Discovering Fulfillment in the Age of Michelle Obama. Now, I had the privilege of covering her at the White House and the president. I got to know them well. Wonderful people, but I believe Michelle Obama was a game changer for how we see African-American women in this country. Not since probably Claire Huxtable on The Cosby Show had we had such a positive image of an African-American family. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We all know wonderful African-American women. We have mothers, aunts, grandmothers, etc., but that's not always the image of us. And I think it's very important that we redefine those stereotypes, and I know that you've talked about that. The third thing that I want to talk about, finally, is I'm going to talk about the woman code. And I'm going to give you some tools and some takeaways. You've gotten a lot of information, and as I was telling your dean, I'm not going to be a nerd tonight. I'm going to give you some stuff you can walk away with, some tools that you can put into practice at work, in your relationships, in your life as women to help you succeed and thrive, and to also help other women and lift as you climb. So it's very important. So I've got a lot to do, but they've given me a little time to work with. I promise you I'm not going to bore you. I don't do speeches. And we're going to work through a couple of things here. So as you know, this year's conference theme is intersectionality, understanding women's lives, and resistance in the past and present. Let that sink in a little bit. If you actually really dissected that title, Understanding Women's Lives and Resistance in the Past and Present. The 2019 conference, of course, marks the 30th anniversary of Kimberly Crenshaw's use of the term intersectionality. Now, I know you've talked about that over the last day or two, and you've dissected it, but just think of it very basic. Intersection. You drove through one on your way here. There's a collision of something. There's an intersection. There's a meeting. And it occurred to me as I was preparing for this evening's dinner that of all the things I could talk about, I want to talk about this. Ladies, particularly young women in the room, women who are just starting out, you're in college, you're just entering the workforce, and women who are under 40, as I like to say. Not that you're old if you're over 40, but I want to talk to you for a moment. I think the most important thing that I can tell you tonight, tell us as women tonight, in this climate of national uncertainty and division, of political rancor, racial unrest, and the Me Too movement, is to be engaged and informed about your country. Let me park there for a moment. I want to talk about understanding your country and how your country was formed. How many of you know that America is a republic? It's not a democracy. That's an important distinction. We'll talk about that a little bit. I also want you to be informed about your government. We are in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. This is the birthplace of America. It started here. And lastly, I want you as women in particular to be engaged about your rights. Your rights. What are your rights as an American? What are your rights as a citizen? How many of us actually know that? Study that, understand how this all works. All you have to do is look at the 2017 and 2018 elections. Women are taking America by storm. Here in Virginia in 2017, historic numbers of women elected to the State House. And then in 2018, historic numbers of women elected to the Congress. We went from 1 woman in the Congress to 3. And I'm hoping we'll see a female governor soon. No, it's not going to be me. All right. So what I want to talk about is this notion of America. because I think as we try to dissect this intersectionality, we can't do it. And Kalita, congratulations on the article and what you talked about, that really the answer to what's going on with us, particularly as women, and how we overcome and get through and lift each other, is really found in our past. Now, that may sound a little strange to you. How can the answers to my present and my future be found in my past? Well, I like to quote one of my favorite Virginians, writer, statesman. He was America's third president, Thomas Jefferson, spoke these words in 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Let's park there for a moment. Thomas Jefferson, what a contradiction. A man of liberty, a man of freedom, a founding father, brilliant statesman, husband, father, slave owner, who fathered 6 children with his concubine, as they call her, Sally Hemings. We know that to be true now. I want to park at Jefferson's words because it gets to the point Kalita was making about looking back to our past to understand. Some of us, particularly my brothers and sisters in the room, and I call you that because every one of us in this room are Americans. If you're not yet an American and you're immigrating to this country, you one day hopefully will be able to take that oath and you will be an American. It is the greatest thing on earth that you can be, to be an American. And I want us to park at those words of Mr. Jefferson because it's important that we understand he said all men. Now, you could argue with me, Sophia, he couldn't say all men and women are created equal. That wouldn't have been as eloquent. Perhaps not. But I think you need to understand the foundings of this nation to understand why we are where we are right now and why we still have this racial tension and this collision that we seem to be on. Why black and white Americans and Americans of color seem to see things very differently. Even though we live in the same America, we experience it very differently. And I believe it all lies back in this document, in this great Declaration of Independence, because the men who wrote that document were all white, all male, landowners, merchants, lawyers, farmers. They were men of privilege and wealth. And you have to understand that if you close your eyes and go back 241 years, Virginia is the richest colony of all the colonies. We're the richest. We're the most prosperous. Nobody does anything without Virginia. We have all the great statesmen, Madison, Monroe, Jefferson, Washington. We are exceptional. Yet, here we find ourselves in 2019, 400 years hence from slavery, and 200 plus years later from the Declaration, and our governor doesn't seem to know the difference between what is an indentured servant and what's a slave, whether or not it's appropriate to wear blackface or not. I'm not going to get into politics, but that's the elephant in the room. Let's just be honest. We all watched it on our televisions. And the point is that I don't know the governor. He seems to be a pretty decent fellow. But the reality is that lots of people live in that same zone of not knowing what can I say, what's right, what's wrong, what's appropriate when it comes to race. And then when you put race and gender together, you really have a challenge. So I want us to really think about this summit. And when you leave here, don't just kind of take the stuff you learned and stick it on a shelf. Really question yourself. Do you understand how your country started? Do you understand the division of race? Do you understand that after slavery you had 100 years of Jim Crow? And that only in the last 50 years in this state in 1967, Loving versus Virginia, that's the first case where a white man could marry a black woman legally in America, in the South. That's me. I was born in 1967. I've just outed myself. 52 years ago. That's not a long time ago, ladies and gentlemen. So let's put it into context. I'd like to just say a few words about what I want to charge you to do tonight. I want to charge every woman and every man in this room and every American in this room to understand one thing that I think will help us on this discussion about intersection and how we deal with each other and how we respect each other's differences. One, I think we need to understand that we are a nation of diverse people. I want you to also understand that there's no other place on earth like America. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe in it. I believe that we have problems. I believe that we have issues. But I also believe what our founding fathers coined when they coined the phrase e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Let me say that again. E pluribus unum, out of many, we are one America. What does that mean, Sophia? Well, I'm glad you asked. What it means is that differences are good. They're not bad. You don't have to think like your neighbor. You don't even have to like the way your neighbor thinks. But you do and should respect that American's right to have an opinion different from yours without feeling like you have to attack them or they have to attack you. We've gotten to an ugly place where we now demonize someone that doesn't agree with us or that doesn't see the world through the same lens we see it. That's not America. That's not what made us what we are. What made us what we are is that we started half slave and half free. And then somehow we found ourselves in 2008 with a black president of the United States of America. That can only happen here. We are always working towards a more perfect union. Why am I saying this to you tonight? Because it's on my heart. I'm bothered about what I see on social media. I'm bothered about what I see being reported, the racial tensions, the fights, people taking videos of each other, texting the police and calling 911 when you see black people barbecuing or in the elevator. Or it's like we've gone crazy. And we need to come back to ourselves. Your brother's not your enemy. Your sister is not your enemy. Just because they're different doesn't mean that that's wrong. If you're a liberal, be a liberal. If you're a conservative, be a conservative. If you're a moderate like me and stuck in the middle, be that too. But at the end of the day, understand that what makes this country great, and by the way, this country's already great, but what makes this country great is when we live out that motto, e pluribus unum, out of many we are one. The founders got it. Do you think that Virginia liked Massachusetts? Do you think South Carolina liked Delaware? No. In fact, the South said if you do away with slavery, as Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and John Adams wanted to do in this declaration, we will split from the Union. We ultimately fought a civil war over it. So I'm trying to give you a little context about where we are. So don't panic. America's going to be okay. We always are okay. I'm an optimist. We're having some friction right now. We're having some growing pains. The biggest thing that you need to know, and I'm going to stop, is this. Is that whenever there are great demographic shifts in any country or society, there is upheaval. There is strain. There is conflict. Within 10 years, just 10 years, America will be a majority-minority country. Let that sink in. People of color will be the majority. Not just black, not Hispanic, but people of color. America is changing, and change is always hard. So it's important that if this is who we're going to be, and none of us in this room can stop it, by the way. We can't. Yelling at each other and screaming at each other isn't going to get us where we want to go. We're going to have to learn to deal with each other and hear one another. And by the way, that goes both ways. I'm going to give you a challenge before I get on to talking about what I really want to get to, which is the tools for how we do what I'm suggesting to you tonight. And I really want to challenge everyone in this room for the rest of this year. We're in March, almost in April. I want to challenge you that every month at your job, at your church, in your community, to talk to somebody, have a cup of coffee with somebody, invite somebody to sit down with you who doesn't look like you, who you may not know very well, who has a different experience than you, and listen. Listen and share. Over a cup of coffee, you can't get in too much trouble. Just listen. Ask questions. I don't know. What does this mean when this happens? Or how can I do better? How can I understand more? And then close your mouth and listen. I want to close with and I'm not closing my remarks, I'm closing this section. As I told you, I'm going to do 3 things. I want to close with a quote from one of my favorite people, Coretta Scott King. And she said, "Women, if the soul of the nation is to be saved, I believe that you must become its soul." Sisters in this room, and ladies, I'm talking to you right now. It is time for us to become the soul of this nation. Black, white, yellow, red, women, it is time to stand up, to step up, and to let our voices be heard. Men, that does not mean we want to diminish you, dishonor you, not love you. It means none of that. It just means it's time for the girls. As John Adams' wife Abigail said to him, "Don't forget the ladies." Well, they forgot us at the Constitutional Convention. But she was whispering in his ear, "Husband, I walk with you. I'm your help. I stand beside you." And maybe I'm just a dreamer, maybe I'm just an optimist. I really believe we can do this if we become the soul of this nation. And women, there's something about us that's awesome when we operate in our power. I'm not talking about yelling. I'm not talking about screaming. I'm talking about our true power of womanhood. It's the soul. And I want to just encourage us, just some remarks that were on my heart about where my country is. And I'm worried, and I think that a lot of you are too, but I'm also optimistic that we will get through this, and we will get through this a better America, not a lesser America, but a better America. Now, before I get to the slide here, and again, I'm going to give you some nuggets. These are the 3 books I've written. I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to take this out, I want to move a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about this first book and why I wrote it. Black Woman Redefined. Everyone says I look like Whitney Houston in that picture. What y'all think? I don't know. Better? Worse? or I get Mary J. Blige. I get Mary J. Blige or Whitney Houston. So at any rate, I couldn't fit in that 0 again if I tried. Any rate, the reason I wrote this book all starts in the 2008 primary, the Iowa primary. And a young senator from Chicago named Barack Obama is running for president. And everybody thinks it's a joke. Like, we're not electing a black president. That's not going to happen. And his wife, Michelle, gave a speech. And she made a remark that for the first time I was proud of my country. You guys remember when she said that? Boy, did people go crazy. Here was this black woman who is a senator's wife, and we don't know who she is. And she's saying for the first time she's proud of her country. Of course, her remarks were taken completely out of context. But conservative media went crazy. Cal Thomas wrote the scathing, you remember Cal Thomas wrote the scathing column, and George Will and others, they just went crazy. How could she? How dare she say that? It's because black women aren't supposed to speak. And we definitely are not supposed to speak, particularly in a negative way, about our country, because now we're Angela Davis. Not that there's anything wrong with Angela Davis, but in the popular culture of how we see race and gender in America, white is seen as white women, or women, rather, is seen as white. When we see black, we see men. The 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, giving black men the right to vote, didn't give black women the right to vote. So somehow we became less black, I guess. I don't know what happened, but we didn't qualify as black. And we certainly didn't qualify as male. And when the 19th Amendment came and women got the right to vote, guess what? Black women living below the Mason-Dixon line still couldn't vote because of Jim Crow segregation. We're always left off the block. And what I wanted to do, getting back to Michelle Obama, she got attacked so viciously over a comment. I wrote a column in the Washington Post called Black Female Accomplished Attacked. And that column went viral. And the next thing I know, I had a book deal. And the next thing I know, I was covering the race. And the next thing I know, the Obamas had won, and the rest was history. What's my point? I wrote this book to redefine because, as I said at the outset, every black woman I know is not angry. You know that's what we are, right? That's what we're called. We were talking with the dean, and we asked her, did she ever get called angry? And what did you say, what words you get? You get bossy, and what else? Yeah, you know the B word, right? Can't say that word, right? But every woman in this room has been called one of those things. Angry, bossy, you talk too much, you need to listen more. These are words to shut us down and to keep us from accessing our power. But I wrote the book because I wanted to redefine the image of what it means to be a black woman in America. That's a tall order. But the point is, having the first black first president and first black first lady was redefining all in its own, because we had never done it before. So again, when you leave here, to my white sisters, and I've had many of them say this to me over the years, Sophia, we're women. What's the difference? There's a big difference. My experience is not the same as yours as a woman in America. It is not. I'll tell you a quick story. When this book was being published, and I was talking with Marcia Litkock, the editor of the Chicago Tribune, and yes, I use her name. And she calls me up, and I'm expecting them to run a full-page thing like we've talked about, and Clarence Page has set it up. He writes for them, and she says, I'm not gonna run a story on your book. I said, what happened? She said, well, frankly, I find it preposterous. I said, okay, what do you mean? She said, well, black women don't go through this. I said, excuse me? When were you black the last time? Oh, well, that's not what I meant. I just can't imagine that these things are true. Of course you can't imagine they're true. You don't live as a black woman in America. It's microaggressions like that. It's stuff like that that tells us, stop talking about that. This is uncomfortable for me. And I'm saying this to my sisters in the room because I want you to stop being afraid to ask a question or to say something. But on the other hand, I want you to honor the fact that people of color have different experiences than you do. That's real. It's not made up. You can't make this stuff up. God, I wish that I could. But that offended me so deeply, because here was a white woman telling me that the research done in my book, by a white woman, by the way, named Kellyanne Conway. You all know who that is. This was when Kellyanne was different, at any rate. And she was a pollster. And we did this together as a project because we wanted to make the point that black women experience life differently. And here was a woman at one of the most respected papers in America telling me this was not realistic. It couldn't be true, because who could put up with this, she said. Every day, 24/7. I'm not trying to be flip, but I'm trying to make a point that it's something as simple as respecting another woman when she shares her journey with you and validate. You know, in marriage, if you tell your spouse something and if he grunts at you and you're like, oh, what is that? You want validation. Yes, I heard you. I will try to do better. Whatever the case is, you want to be validated. When your neighbors or your friends, the Muslim neighbor, the Latino neighbor, the black neighbor, the white neighbor. I got a lot of white neighbors who are at our house all the time, drinking and having a good time, and they love Trump, and I hate Trump. But you know what? I don't put them out my house. We sit there and we just drink more wine, and I listen, and I go, okay, I'm going to go get some more food now. My point is, they're entitled to their opinion. I may not like it. It may not make me comfortable, but that's what's going to save this country. When we can begin to respect each other and still be friends and still drink and break bread with each other and be like, okay, well, I didn't like that a whole lot, but I love my neighbor. They're really good people. And they're not bad people because they support someone that you don't support. And you're not a bad person because you support someone different than they would support. We got to stop being so nasty and mean to each other and attacking each other and belittling each other's experiences. Learn to listen to your neighbor's heart, to that woman of color's heart, to my white female peers. I just spoke at Microsoft is International Women's Day. Microsoft, one of the biggest companies in the world. I will tell you that in that room of 1,000 women, there was one black female executive. There were probably 20 white female executives. And at the lower levels of those incoming whatever, I would say if there were 3% women of color, maybe 4%, and they were mostly from India. in the tech sector. What am I saying? One of the world's great companies right here in America is not as diverse as you would think it should be. What am I saying? White sisters, you're on the ascend. You're doing better. You're not doing as well as you should be doing. You're making 85 cents to $1 of every man. Black women and women of color are making 60 cents to every dollar of a man with the same education and the same credentials. So I need my white sisters in this room. When you're the boss, when you're the manager, when you're the professor, when you're the dean, when you're the doctor, whatever you are, you have to lift as you climb. You have to reach out to your sisters of color, because if we can't depend on each other to help each other, what do we got? Now, when I was coming up, and I'm a lawyer by trade in one of the world's biggest law firms, all my mentors were white men. And they were white men because there were no women to be mentors. And there were certainly no women of color to be mentors. So white men can be good mentors too. They can, and they are. So don't close somebody off just because they look a little different from you or they may be of a different sex. The point is, can you listen, and are you willing to connect? All right, now let's get on to the fun part. How much time do I have left? So I keep it right. I don't think I'm doing this right. There we go. About how many? 20. Okay, 20. All right, I can knock this out. All right, this is where you get to tweet and have some fun. So my third book, The Woman Code, 20 Powerful Keys to Unlock Your Life, is all about being a woman and the code of womanhood. The code is as old as Eve in the garden, and it's as new as the newest baby girl that's born. The code is a timeless compass for women on how we love ourselves and how we treat each other as women. And I picked out a couple codes that I thought would be appropriate for your theme of intersectionality, that would give you something when you have a real life situation at work or in your relationships, or maybe you're dealing with something with you, that you will actually say, I got some takeaways that I can remember and put into practice. So the first three things I want to say is three things I've already said. We are better together. We are a sisterhood, and we are all we have. That comes from Michelle Obama. She said that in her speech to the Spelman College grads when she was First Lady. I want you to know, ladies, that we're being taught now that somehow, I don't know to say we're different, that we're not like our mothers or our grandmothers, but the reality is we are. We're always going to be the same as women. We're made up of three things. You're not just a workhorse. You're not just a person that plays on this gadget. You have a mind, a body, and a soul. And one of the things that they're always telling us as women that's not true is about this elusive thing called work-life balance. It doesn't exist. I'm here to tell you, so stop chasing it. Because you're one integrated human being. You are one person. And you're just one you. So in order to make you better, you got to deal with you. You see, it's not always the other person. It's not always the other woman. Sometimes it's us. And when you get a hold on you, then, and only then, can you deal better with others. All of us has had the mean boss, the mean woman that we don't like, the queen bee, other names. We don't like her. And we're like, what's wrong with her? Well, let's talk about that. Code number 1. And again, write these down. The bottom line about knowing your value, I can't tell you how many women I meet in this world who are powerful and smart, and they don't know their value, and they don't know their worth. And your worth is not defined by your degree or by how much money you make, ladies. Young ladies, hear me on this. And it's certainly not defined by your footprint on the internet. Knowing your value is about you loving and honoring you. That's not trite. It never gets old. Every woman you know in your life, and the one I know in my life, the ones I know in my life who have problems, don't like themselves. They don't know their value. And if I don't like me as a woman, I'm never going to like her, ever, because I don't like me. So knowing your value and your worth, young women, please respect yourself. Don't put things on the internet that you don't want people to see. Don't assume that something you think you're sharing in private is going to be kept private. It's not. Know your value and know your worth. And when you know your value, I hear this from corporate HR executives all the time when they talk about how when women come in for a job, if it's a woman and a man, and let's say they were going to give each of them an offer. The man will always come back. If the job is for $90,000 a year, the man will say, I need 100, and I need these other things. The woman never negotiates up. She takes the offer and she says, thank you. Because we don't believe we're worth more. We don't believe we should speak up about money. And we should. When you know your value, everybody else knows your value too. Next. Teach people how to treat you. This is one of my favorites. We're always complaining about how somebody's not treating us right. The reality is, you must set healthy boundaries in your life as a woman. And in the sisterhood of women, this one will protect you most of all, because when you teach people how to treat you, it's a matter of you saying, this is my line, this is what I'll allow, this is what I won't allow, and people treat you according to how you treat yourself. You know that, right? People study you. People know what they can get away with and what they can't. And when you're dealing with other women, it is so important, sisters, to teach people how you want to be treated. People aren't mind readers. You have to help them. Now I want to get into, and again, I can only pick a few of these because I can't go through all 20. Thriving at work and in business. So let's talk about some of the professional codes. Emotional IQ. How many of you know what emotional IQ is? Anybody want to, good. Anybody want to throw out something at me? What is emotional IQ? Just talk, say it. Come on, you aren't shy. Very good. Basically, it's managing your own emotions and managing the emotions of others. Now, everyone in this room works with other human beings. Some of you are supervisors, bosses, you run universities, you run corporations, etc. You have to be able, in this age we're in a different age. It's different than when I come up. There were no computers. There was no technology. That's real. I know young people, you think that's crazy, but there was a time not too long ago when we didn't have phones, when we didn't have computers. You had to actually talk to people and deal with people. So this emotional IQ as a woman, particularly getting to the point of intersectionality, to my white sisters again and to my sisters of color, we have to begin to see each other through a different lens. Not just as women, yes, we're that, but we have to understand that we have differences within our gender of being a woman. And it's about understanding that woman's experience is different from mine. Therefore, I can't expect her to do what I do it how I do it. We're going to have to work through this. It's emotional intelligence. Next, lift others as you climb. This is one of my favorites. You've heard me say this tonight a number of times. Kalita, you're good at this. I said it at the outset. You are one of those women that you're always looking out for other women. You're always opening doors for other women. And ladies, let me tell you, we need to do better at this. The guys are better at this one than us. They've had more practice. But men are better at opening doors for other men. Women, sometimes we're in competition. And I want to tell you tonight, we need to start collaborating as women. We need to start helping opening doors as women, because we are the leaders. We are the CEOs. We are the people now who are rising. We are the decision makers. So you can no longer just point the finger at somebody else. It's got to be about what you do. And let me tell you why that matters. Because ultimately, one day, you'll retire, or maybe your job will be phased out. And if you treat other women at your job well, and you're a good boss and a good supervisor, and you're fair, and you open up opportunities, and you lift and you build, guess what? You're going to make a lot of friends. And when those women see you not being treated well, or they're seeing that you got pushed out, they're going to pick up the phone and help you. I've seen it time and time again in my life. But to the women who weren't nice, and to the bosses that didn't help, and they didn't mentor, and they didn't sponsor, nobody really cared. So this one is important, the lifting others as you climb. Now this one's good. This is me taking a shot at Steve Harvey, because I hate his book, Don't Think Like a Man. Or Think Like a Man, actually, is what he wants. Do not think like a man, ladies. You do not need to do that. You do not want to do that. This is a great time to be a woman. It's a wonderful time to be a woman. And the important thing that I want to talk about here, and the point I want to get across, is soft skills. We were talking about this, right? About being hard, or being men saying that you're hard, or you're angry, or you're too much of this, or you're too much of that. What I want every woman in here to know is you need to embrace your womanhood. You need to embrace that soul piece that I talked about. I think we're better at empathy. I think we're better at emotional intelligence. I think we're better at assessing. Look at the Prime Minister of New Zealand right now. Has she not been amazing? In the most tragic, awful thing you can imagine, she didn't send a tweet. She didn't do any of that. What she did was she went out and she touched people and she comforted people. And then she took action. Now look, we're in Virginia. We're a state of Second Amendment. We love the Second Amendment here. We love the Second Amendment in my house. But the point I'm making is they took decisive action. They made a decision. This isn't going to happen again. And then they did something about it. Thinking like a woman, I think, is a gift. So I want you women out there who feel like you got to be one of the boys or you have to act a certain way or you got to be tough or hard. Get rid of that. That's garbage. That's something somebody fed you that you don't need. You're perfect just the way you are. You are good being a woman. Be okay with that. Next. All right, dealing with others. We're winding down. Dealing with others. Courageous conversations. Now, I alluded to this earlier, but I want to say this to the millennials in the room. I'm going to pick on you for a second, but you'll be okay. I got a news flash for you. Texting is not talking. It's not. And I know that you think it is because that's what you've been taught. But texting has caused more problems and more relationships and more friendships in the workplace than probably most things we have. Courageous conversations is what women need to have. That's what you've been having over the last 2 days. I imagine, I was thinking about this when we were driving down, I was thinking, if I were a white woman, how would I feel if I'm at a conference about intersectionality and the women of color are getting up and talking about how they're treated in the workplace, in academia, as women of color by white women? That's got to be tough to hear. It's got to be tough to listen to because none of us likes to be criticized. None of us likes to be kind of taken out to the backyard a little bit and talked to and sat down. None of us likes that. But sisters, let me tell you, if we can get this one right here, where we again can have these courageous conversations and we can get off the devices and we can actually reconnect as women, because there's a lot more we have in common as women than what we don't have in common. And if we can have the courage to talk to each other and stop the unfriending, go on your Facebook page, you'll see what I'm talking about. People are really mean on Facebook. People are really mean on Twitter. They're blocking, they're ghosting. We've got a whole language now of how we cut people off. That's not going to help you. You have to have the courage when another woman offends you, tell her. Don't tell 10 other people, tell her. Deal with her, help her do better. Which brings me to the next one of my favorites, don't gossip. Everybody kind of smirked at this one. She even did a hand gesture like, my. Tearing down another woman does not make you whole. If you heard nothing else I said today, hear that. Tearing down another woman does not make you whole. Men, tearing down another man does not make you whole. You guys really, again, don't really roll like that. Sports, whatever it is, men can have a knockdown, drag-out fight competition and go to a bar and have a drink and be fine and walk out and never worry about it again. That's not what we do as women. I hate her for life. I'm never going to speak to her again. She did this, she did that. And then we recruit 10 of our friends to also not like that woman. Am I telling the truth or am I making this stuff up? Ladies, damaging one woman damages us all. And we could do a whole conference. Literally, we could do a whole conference on what we do to each other as women. That's not the point of this. The point is just to give you a few things that I know you deal with day to day in the workplace, in your sororities, in your organizations, in your clubs, in your relationships. All of this stuff occurs every day. Resist the temptation to tear another woman down. And finally, this one comes directly from my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, who had a 6th grade education, and she would always say these really amazing things to me when I was little. And as I got older, I understood, Never cut what you can untie. Is that not good? Never cut what you can untie. All she was saying is don't burn bridges unnecessarily. Again, millennials, let me pick on you for a second. I see you writing feverishly. That's good. You guys are the masters at cutting people off. And you don't care. Cut, ghost, unfriend, block, delete. That's your language. I'm here to tell you as an older, wiser woman, it's not going to work out well for you. Do not cut what you can simply step back from. Your best girl, some of us in this room have been through some stuff in our lives. And it's usually the women in our lives that step up and that love us and that nurse us back to health, that pray with us, that hold our hands. How are you going to take your best girl of 30 years and stop speaking to her because you got mad and cut her off because you saw a Facebook post you didn't like? I'm serious about this. Never cut what you can untie. Untying means step back, pray about it, cool off, relax. Now look, there are things you should cut off. There are people you should cut off. There are bridges you should burn all the way down. But those are the rare instances in your life. Those are not the everyday. If you're blocking and cutting and deleting and unfriending every day, the problem is you. It's not everybody else. I think I got one more and then we're finished. Know your row. Another one from my grandmother, country girl that she is. Baby, you better know your front row, she used to say. Know your row. I'm going to end with this. Everything in your life is in rows. You go to a movie theater, if you buy tickets to Hamilton and you're in the front row, you've paid a lot of money for those tickets because they are the best seats in the house. The front row of your life are the people that determine your life. Leadership Principle 101. The 5 people you spend the most time with in your life determine the trajectory of your life. Don't miss this, particularly, again, young folks. Those of us that are upwards over 40, 45, 50 now, it's not that you can't change, you can. It's not that there's still not new things, there are. But where you're at in your life right now, getting with the wrong crowd, being with the wrong people, hanging out with negative people or people who don't lift you, applaud you, support you, that can ruin the dreams and the goals you have for your life. There's a great story in the Bible that I always like to end with, and being that I'm home here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I can talk about the Bible, so it's okay. Mark chapter 2, there's a great story. And there's a story of some friends and a man who his whole life has been on a mat. And this man is paralyzed. And as the gospel tells us, they hear that Jesus has come into town. And they say, well, look, we need to take our friend because this Jesus guy has been healing people. And we need to take our friend. So these 4 friends, the Bible tells, pick up their friend's mat. Now imagine this, 4 guys, and they're carrying their friend. And they're all at Peter's house, and they get to Peter's house, and as the Bible tells us, they can't get in because the line is so long, it's way out the door. And most friends would have stopped there and said, well, look, we carried you to the door, but we can't get in, so we're going home now. But that is not what these friends did. That is not what this front row did. What they did was, the Bible says, they walked up a hill, they cut a hole through Peter's roof, and they lowered their friend down to get healing. What am I saying to you? I'm saying simply this, sisters of the code, sisters of intersectionality, sisters all, you better get you some Mark chapter 2 friends. You better get some friends that are going to stand by you, lift you when you're down, carry you if they have to, and cut a hole through a roof and lower you down to get what you need. That's what this conversation's all about. How do we as women of our time help lift each other as we climb? How do we as women of our time be the soul that heals our nation? Our nation is hurting right now. Our Commonwealth is hurting right now. It is time for women to rise up in sisterhood and love. I'm not talking about some type of revolution, but I am in one way. I'm talking about lifting each other, and when we need to, carrying each other across race, across gender, across Republican, Democrat, black, and white. I'm so over it, and I hope you are too, because we are Americans. E pluribus unum, out of many, we are one. Thank you.